Hi, welcome back to Stronger Roots. We have a very special guest today, and her voice is very powerful on the topic of coercive control. Beth, can you tell us a little bit
Sure.
more about the
So
guest?
today we're honored to welcome Dr. Christine Marie Cocchiola, founder of Coercive Control Consulting Institute. Dr. C is a social worker, professor, speaker, and survivor who has spent more than 20 years educating others about the hidden dynamics of coercive control. She supports protective parents, trains professionals, and advocates for stronger legislation to protect children and families. Most importantly, she brings both the clinical expertise and lived experience to her work, making her voice an essential one in the conversation. Thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Can I call you Dr. C? Is that okay?
That's absolutely fine. And I just want to, there must be information online somewhere that says 20 years. I've been doing this 37.
Oh,
Yes. Yeah.
nice.
I've heard this introduction before, and people don't realize I started this work at 19.
Oh, wow.
And because someone I knew had been abused as a child. So child advocacy became like my significant focus, and then of course domestic abuse tied in there, but then of course never realized I actually was partnered with an abuser at the time, right? Like how that is, these abusers can be extremely nuanced, insidious in their behaviors, and we don't often see it until it's too late, right?
Yeah. So we want to jump right in. Speaking kind of on that level, you may hear from time to time people or family members saying there's no way that this was abuse, or that there's no way that this family, this, woman was abused or this man was abused. How can you kind of talk about that? And maybe they don't see it as abuse because there's no bruises or there's no black eyes or anything like that, physical abuse. Can you talk about what abuse might look like in these types of situations?
Sure. It's so interesting. Just this morning, I posted an article about a woman in Greenwich, Connecticut, who is suing her lawyer because her lawyer called the case contentious. And the husband was videotaping everybody in the family system. And he told her to ignore it or she might lose custody of her children. And my point is that if somebody's recording you, that's abuse. Right? Like, it's like, what? Like, we call these things high conflict, we call them contentious, we say it takes two to tango. And the reality is that I see coercive control as the underpinning of all abuse. When I say all abuse, I mean, think about what racism is. It's about one person exerting power and control over another. Sexism, sex trafficking, child predators. Not all coercive controllers are pedophiles, but all pedophiles are using the same exact grooming tactics as coercive controllers. And so coercive control is, many people call it hidden abuse. That's wrong. Invisible abuse. That is wrong. What it is it's, instead of looking through the violent incident model at abuse, what we really need to do is think about abuse as really very much a pattern of strategies, a multifaceted approach to harm another, to diminish their autonomy, to take away their agency. I start off doing this, if I'm an abuser, psychologically using these tactics, but then people conflate psychological abuse with coercive control. That's not true. It's psychological tactics. And then when those don't work so well, or if I'm trying to exert more power and control over you, I'm trying to gain more access to you, I'm going to use financial abuse. If you attempt to escape in some way, I'm going to use legal abuse. I'm always weaponizing the children. Victims and survivors, protective parents, don't realize this is going on since day one. There is an eroding away of the relationship, the attachment between the safe, protective parent and the abusive parent, because that abusive parent knows what matters most to that safe, protective parent than anything else on the planet. So they're eroding that away just in case they have to use it. They're playing chess all along. Victims and survivors are like, what's really going on? They don't want to believe the abuser is this way. So again, I see it as a trajectory of behaviors, multifaceted approach. It is strategic. Psychological abuse is part of that. And there are other ways. And in fact, physical violence is also a part of that. It's just many abusers, frankly, know that if they use physical violence or sexual violence, oftentimes they've now exposed themselves.
Mhm.
But I see it every day. I see many clients who their children are being physically abused. Court systems, sadly, oftentimes do not recognize it as abuse, or they think children need two parents. And then also, we know victims and survivors show up with a history of physical or sexual violence or stalking, which is illegal in all 50 states. Yet when it happens by someone that you're in an intimate relationship with, all of a sudden, it's not really stalking to the same degree. So,
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think what you mentioned there too is really key, especially in a lot of the work that Danielle and I have done as well, is the court's view that the children need two parents.
Mhm.
They need healthy parents. They need healthy parents. I'm gonna leave that one right there. They need healthy parents.
Well, I think, I think before we got on the call, we talked a little bit about how we know that sometimes people, and you have my book behind you right
Yeah,
there, right?
I
Yeah.
do.
So framed woman in the family court underworld. And, it's not to say that this doesn't happen to men, but we live in a society where patriarchy is structurally endemic. And it's structurally endemic in a lot of these, in every single powerful organization in the world. And so if we can help the most vulnerable, mothers and children, then we're going to help dads who are experiencing this too. But we have to start somewhere. And so starting here and exposing this idea that there are many professionals who work in the court who may have the best of intentions. And again, I have seen sadly too many times where there isn't the best of intentions, let's be clear, but that they don't understand the pathology of abusers. They don't understand how these people show up in court. So if you're someone who studied this and researched this my entire life, understanding how these abusers work, but also how this impacts children.
Mhm.
And so we are not talking about, like, literally the elephant in the room is that when you have a child who's misbehaving at school, or we have, um, my gosh, like mass shootings, or we have, someone who really isn't able to function in maybe the workforce in a healthy way. They're creating conflict, right? Or people in relationship dynamics, intimate relationships, or even, CEOs of businesses, however it is, when you have people who are behaving in ways that are harmful to others or are being harmed by others, that's because they didn't feel safe somewhere in their life. And if we just help children feel safe in their family systems,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, we could prevent so many other harms being inflicted in the world. I mean, it's like, it's so clear,
Yeah.
but yeah.
Yeah. I just had a question, and this kind of came up. What kind of tactics or pathology are you seeing from abusive people? What is there anything that kind of sticks out to you? What does that look like? Or
Yeah. So these people are what I call characterologically disordered. I mean, they lack good character, frankly. And, when I work pretty regularly now with Dr. Ramani, what we talk about is that, you could talk about narcissistic personality disorder, but what a lot of people also fail to recognize is there are some borderline tendencies in there. There's a fear of abandonment. There's this black and white thinking that goes on. And we can use the DSM-5, the Diagnostic Statistical Manual, and say, okay, they have NPD. All right, okay, let's talk about that. But the reality is that, there's a lot of ways that the DSM-5 sadly has been harmful to victims and survivors. And it was created based on patriarchy, by the way. So, it was people with power, typically men, psychiatrists, MDs, who were creating diagnoses. So I just am a little bit cautious about that. But what I do say, and what Dr. Ramani and I also agree upon, is that, not all narcissists are narcissistic abusers, right? And also, if you're a narcissistic abuser, you're using the tactics of coercion and control to harm others. So I call them coercive controller narcissistic abusers. And when they're parents, I call them predatory parents because they are preying upon the children. And so the character traits are very much, most of my clients are suffering from people who do have traits of narcissism. the grandiosity, the self-absorbed, the lack of really being able to what we call affectively empathize with other people to a great degree. They have traits of Machiavellianism, which is an ability to manipulate everyone in their world, including court systems, including judges, including attorneys, including, of course, the victim for a very long period of time, and the children. They have psychopathy. They're willing to break the law or get really damn close to that line, and they kind of think they're above the law. They're not going to get caught. And when they do, they claim victim, they claim innocent. What do we know over and over again with these abusers is they use DARVO, right? They deny, attack, reverse, victim, and offender. And then lastly, is they have sadistic qualities. They actually enjoy inflicting pain. This is why my dear friend and colleague who recently passed away, sadly, Dr. Andrew Cicchetti, called it a multifaceted strategic approach, because there's strategy in this. There's a savviness, there's an understanding of how to actually inflict this pain. And again, what's the best way to inflict pain is to financially decimate someone, take away their home, their belongings, all of those things. But of course, take away their children, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So you talked about predatory families and things like that. And what types of tactics do they use? Like, is there special kind of terms like triangulation? Is there like what kind of things like that kind of play out? Can you talk about those?
Sure. So when we define coercive control, and we use the term, one of the ways that coercive controllers, one of the tactics they use is psychological abuse, which is gaslighting, manipulation, intimidation, and isolation. And what we do oftentimes is we think about that in relationship to the partnership. We also think about trauma bonding in relationship to the adult partnership. But what we're not doing is actually understanding that children growing up in this family system are very readily recognizing at an early age that there's one parent, the predatory parent, that they may not perceive as predatory, by the way. That parent might be the fun parent. They may not be. So they're all omnipresent, meaning the kids know, like, oh my gosh, but that's a subconscious feeling within their body. And nobody teaches children this, right? Even the victim survivors didn't really understand what was going on in their body, right? They diminished their feelings of anxiety, or they had anxiety and then they were told there was something wrong with them, right? So so I would say that trauma bonding is occurring at a very young age with these children, right? And that is because of triangulation, right? This idea of pitting people against each other. And what does that create, by the way? That creates a betrayal trauma. So wait a minute, you might, and again, like I said, they're all omnipresent and they're all coming from an authoritarian perspective. Think about like Hitler or a cult leader, right? And then everybody within the family system lines up. Even the adult victim lines up, right? And so there's an understanding that if I do X, Y, and Z, I'm going to receive love by a child. If I do this, there's not, and the adult victim is always regulating their behavior. If I walking on eggshells, if I do X, Y, and Z, there's not going to be a problem here. Everything's going to remain status quo. So what we do as protective parents, and you know that my children disclosed me at 17 and 19, they remember the day they were 9 and 10 when he began to overtly, he was always indoctrinating them against me, but to overtly, he said that I was the cheater. He had cheated. He said that I needed my medication and that I could not be trusted. So betrayal trauma, like, wait a minute, the person I've always felt safe with and securely attached to, now I'm not sure. And if an abuser continues, the predatory parent continues to do this, what they're doing is they're fracturing an attachment that was actually there the moment you held the baby in your hands, right? In the moment you held that baby in your arms, the attachment was formed in utero for those of us who carried our babies in utero. So the abuser is maliciously fracturing that attachment and does so by pitting everyone in the family against each other. But again, it doesn't have to be like from that authoritarian perspective. It can be much more nuanced. It can be, it's too bad mom's so tired lately, huh? Or, sheesh, mom's sick again. Or, oh, mom's working again. Oh, sometimes she misses your soccer games, but, I'm worried about her. I wish she wouldn't work so much. So it can even come across as care and concern. Do that to a developing brain. What are you doing? So you are actually, I call it broken brain. You are actually breaking a child's brain. When a child cannot feel securely attached to a safe caretaker, it is compromising their healthy development, their ability to attach, of course, their ability to feel safe. They live in fear, but they don't even know it's fear. And then oftentimes it's happening right under our nose, and we don't even know what's happening. And we always assume this person, they may not be too nice to me all the time, or we might have had an argument, or, geesh, this relationship, I'm not sure, but we think they're an amazing parent when they've never been they have never been a good parent.
Yeah, and it's interesting when you planting that seed that maybe there's something wrong with the other parent. Maybe that parent is not feeling well, but that hearing that over and over and over, and then that child starts to develop some kind of a feeling or a concern, or maybe a little bit of anxiety around, well, is something wrong with mom? Is something going to happen to mom? Or, something wrong with dad? Is he's sick all the time? Or, even if they're not, it's just that repetitive planting that seed. And in a child, once they think on that, they can just start to, I can see where that can kind of get out of hand sometimes. And that anxiety is stemming from that wondering if something's going to happen to that parent.
Sure. So if I feel betrayal and I don't feel safe, right, then I'm going to have anxiety. And one of the very significant manifestation of these children who grow up in these family systems is they have intense anxiety, often social anxiety. So when you grow up in a family system where you don't feel safe, what happens is that you devalue yourself. You don't think you matter. You learn to perform to survive, right? And so sometimes that performance is like, unfortunately brings on character traits of the abuser, right? Though, but other times it's just this dysregulation state, right? But these are kids who manifest with internalizing behaviors and externalizing. So the kids who are really angry and screaming and yelling, that's actually self-hate, just outward. Depression is self-hate inward, where I just withdraw and I don't share how I feel and I just behave as a soldier, right? I mean, I do say, I mean, it sounds horrifying, but think about all the young boys who were soldiers for Hitler. They were indoctrinated. It was like a cult. They felt they had no choice, but they didn't love them. They knew they were doing something wrong. They knew it didn't feel right. And I don't think children are ever 100% alienated. I believe that attachment that they formed with us can never be entirely broken. I think the older they are, the harder it gets, right? The more that they are pulled apart from us, it's more challenging. But I don't think they're ever 100% alienated from themselves.
Yeah. I want to switch gears just a little bit. So, survivors often talk about coming out of a fog, or like the veil is lifted when they finally see some of the tactics, or when they see this person that they love and trusted for so long, not really, like they know something's going on, but they just can't place their finger on it. And maybe described it as coming out of a fog. Is that kind of typical for survivors of coercive control, domestic violence, that kind of thing?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think for sure. And then once you see it, you can't unsee it. Isn't that the truth, right? All of a sudden you're like, whoa. And sometimes the abuser has to be absolutely horrifying. This is, it's an interesting conversation because coercive control, now codified, by the way, in 9 states as a form of domestic abuse. I don't see it as a form of domestic abuse. I see it as the underpinning, but we're getting somewhere. Okay. But it's interesting that this idea that people can be in these relationships for a long period of time, not know what's happening to them, and then they decide, then they see it, and then they decide they're going to escape. And the abuse gets worse. And what I hear over and over again from victims is that the abuse, it always gets worse. Coercive control intensifies post-separation. We know that from research. So victims almost have to suffer that to not actually go back again, because they go back so often, right? And the trauma bond is a neurological response in the brain. Like it literally is pulling you towards that person. We know this from Biderman's work with prisoners of war. So it pulls us back to that relationship with a little bit of good. They throw a little breadcrumb towards us, an intermittent reinforcement. And so when the victim does finally escape and the abuse gets worse, it's like almost like a, oh my gosh, that was abuse. I'm out of the fog. I totally see it now. Right. I'm sure you can empathize with that, right? The moment you were like, oh.
Yeah, definitely. And post separation abuse is what the term is called. And can you talk about like what survivors go through during that stage? I mean, that is such a crucial stage, and it's almost like in the marriage you kind of knew what to expect and everything, but once you shift into post separation abuse, it intensifies. And what kind of things can you expect that survivors may see during that period?
Yeah. So isn't it interesting? We always tell victims to leave,
Hmm.
but the reality is they're the most at risk when they leave, whether physical violence or otherwise, right? Through the systems, there's systemic coercive control that sadly is occurring oftentimes, where victims aren't believed. We're talking about your domestic abuse, the coercive control you experienced, talking about that actually cannot be brought into court because, your lawyer might tell you it shouldn't be brought into court. Sometimes it does work against victims, survivors. So what does it look like? It looks like for me, I do custody and divorce coaching and things like that. It sometimes means like getting out the least scathed. What does that look like? And maybe you believe you deserve, child support, but if you know that if you let go of, if you're capable of it, if you're able to live in a shoebox, frankly, and you can let go of the child support, will the abuser let go a little bit? Will you retain 50-50 or 70-30? If you have 70-30, your goal, like I think a lot of these people are abusers, and it's very unconventional to say, but the system doesn't want to believe they're abusers. So how do we keep our children the most safe? I do say that protective parents have so much influence. I have a mom who sees her children every other week at a diner for an hour. He stole them across state lines. He went from Connecticut to Massachusetts, got them into boarding school, and then they didn't want to return to their mother. But she gets every other week at a diner. And when I first met her, of course, I mean, what was that? That they didn't want to see her, but he would almost not make them go. But it's funny, he didn't stop them from going because it was an hour. It was almost like he knew it was torture for her, right? How does he torture her more? And it would be these lunches would not be good because she was so upset, right? And so I coached her and supported her on how to create as many positive memories in 1 hour that she could, letting go of a bad attitude, a negative, one child not she had one child like recently not show up, and she was so upset, but she said, I just sat there with the one child who was there, right? And so we have so much influence. I believe her children are, as soon as they're done with boarding school and they go off to college, I believe they're going to come back. They know she's a safe, protective parent. They know that.
Hmm.
And my question on that is, why do you think, maybe not why do you think, but the kids, I'm sure, are feeling pulled and they have to keep the one parent happy.
Mhm.
Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, so this is the thing. I'll give another example. So I have a mom who has a 12-year-old who they went to see Wicked together, and this father had tried to keep the child away from her for a long time, and they were finally almost back to 50-50. Since the child was 13 months, the mother was in court. So the child's now 12 years old, and they had gone to see Wicked. And every time the mother would bring the child to the transition space, typically the child would totally shut down with the mother. They would have a great time and then totally shut down with the mother, get out of the car and run to her father, right? Like, thank God I'm away from mom. And mom knew, and we taught, we were working on it. Mom knew that the child's just acting, performing for dad, right? But this particular day, they went to see Wicked, and the kid loved the movie, just loved it. And she forgot to perform. And she got out of the car and she ran to, like, she was like hugging her mom, saying, like, so happy, so excited, and got out of the car and so happy, ran over to dad. The next day, dad went for ex parte. And he got it. The kid started saying that I feel unsafe with my mother. I don't want to be with my mother. I hate my mother. And the father said the child was going to testify in court against the mother. Can you imagine?
No.
Can you imagine? And so this mother's like, of course, we expect these reactions. How could she do this? I'm so disappointed in her. I can't believe she would do this. Why would she lie? Why would she lie? I'm like, she's a prisoner.
Protecting herself.
She's a prisoner. She has no choice. And so when these kids show up in court and the judges actually believe the child, I convinced this mom, do not make her go to court. It's the last thing she wants to do is testify against you. She has no choice. Give her a choice. Let her know you are on her team, that I know why you're doing this. I know why you have to hate me, quote unquote. I know why you have to behave this way. I know we can't see each other anymore, by the way. I know. I'm here. I get it. Give her that understanding some way. And by not making her testify, she did it, right? But to the point is, if that kid had testified, first of all, that kid would have been so much shame. How were abusers created? Well, they're born with more of these traits for sure, but then they are shamed over and over and over. They can never authentically be themselves. And this child's been performing and been able to perform the way she needs to with dad and then with mom and separate it. And then this one time, these two issues get conflated. And now she's going to have to testify. That shame ignition is absolutely horrifying for a child. It's going to create more traits like an abuser.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So what the court system needs to understand is what's the foundation of the parental subsystem? What are these two people alike? Like what are these two people like separately? And then when they came together, who had more power over the other person? Look at the 12 years of freaking litigation here, for God's sakes. The mother, who is a doctor, and the father, who is a doctor. And look at these two people. And why has this mother had to fight all of the time to have custodial time with her child? Who's the abuser? Why is this child willing to go to court and testify? Whoa, you're like, full stop. But
that's what we want the family courts to see.
yes,
that's why we're doing this, to help them understand and be able to identify these things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We do. And we need them to have coercive control training. I mean, a certification in coercive control. It can't be, the problem is most of the judicial trainings that are occurring, judicial actually trains themselves. Maybe there's people who actually, get it, but they're also looking through the violent incident model. And they're not understanding the pathology of abusers nor the harm inflicted on the developing brain. When you pull a child from their secure, safe attachment, you have done a lot of damage. It can be healed, but you have done a lot of damage.
So you had mentioned something about there being 8 to 9 states that recognize coercive control. Why do you think that the other states are lacking, and what can we do about it to kind of get the word out there? And who can we talk to get this on the books?
Yeah. So there's, I mean, basically because it's relatively new in our vernacular. Mm-hmm. And, it's exciting, I guess, that we have 9 that have codified it, but just so you know, the UK has criminalized it. And the UK actually includes love bombing in their definition of coercive control. So we are far behind, to say the least. Dr. Evan Stark, who I worked directly under for my doctoral work, he actually helped criminalize it, as did Laura Richards, the criminal analyst. She helped criminalize it in the UK. So in the United States, I mean, it's state by state. We're a large country. It takes time. If your state has not codified it, you can reach out to legislators who care about children. We have seen this piece of legislation co-opted against protective mothers over and over again. I mean, I have two in the state of Connecticut where it's been used against them. It's rather sad, but this is what legislation does. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but we have to weigh the benefits a little bit. Like, is it more beneficial? And what it really does is it says, listen, if you haven't suffered physical violence, but you can prove other forms of abuse, then you are a victim also. That's what it does. Does this help in family court? No. I mean, we have research that affirms that the moment a victim brings up her own experiences of domestic abuse, and again, I call it all coercive control, but the moment that she brings it up, she is disbelieved at a rate of 55%. And additional research in that same research study states that if a mother actually discloses her children being physically abused by someone, the other partner, in the family system, then she is disbelieved at a rate of 73%. And if she discloses sexual abuse of her children, she's disbelieved at a rate of 85%. So the court systems are not always believing victims, which we, again, if we go back to the beginning of the conversation, you know, patriarchy is structurally endemic. It's societally endemic in our world. And I want to be clear, patriarchy hurts women, but it hurts men too. I mean, we have little boys growing up in a world where they're not allowed to be vulnerable. They're shamed. The first, and Bell Hooks talks about this, the first atrocity, basically, I'm using my word, against boys is when they actually are, shamed at a young age for showing a vulnerability, and how harmful that is, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot, and we could talk about this all day long.
I know. It's like my brain is just going, I'm like, oh, ask her about this, ask her about
And
this.
this has been a long time coming, even in my situation, because I've told Danielle with my experience, I swore one day, now in mine 39 years ago, I swore one day because I was told, you can't prove that. You can't prove it. And how many times are we told that? And what I find interesting is, but I always said, one day we're going to have that in Ohio Revised Code. We're going to have it there, and that's one of our goals. But what I find interesting is over the last 10 years or so, and I've really gotten involved in the anti-human trafficking work in our state, and done a lot there. And as I was teaching and training and all this, and force, fraud, and coercion is part of what makes trafficking criminal. And why is it criminal coercion, criminal and trafficking, but it isn't in the domestic field?
I know. I know.
Why? And when I've said that to people, they're like, oh, yeah, why isn't that? How can it be? It's the same thing.
Absolutely.
Same thing. So
Yeah, I'm interviewing Sarma Mangelis, the bad vegan story, the woman with the duck tattoo, and if you, the whole experience is just coercive control. That's all it is. And when you think about cults, I always say that children growing up in these family systems are growing up in a cult. And people don't even realize it. Nobody knows it, right? So it's all coercion. And we knew this. Feminist psychologists in the 70s called it intimate terrorism. We knew it was like living with prisoners of war through Biderman's work. Amnesty International is calling it. All of these things are all lined up. They're just not all coming together, but it's work with what you're doing, which is really helpful, and appreciate it. And if you would ever like me to come back and talk about the trauma to the developing brain, this is anybody who's listening, I'm always trying to help protective parents repair that broken brain, which is a lot of work, and intentional work when you're already a trauma victim, which is it's devastating. Your children are different as a result of their experiences of abuse. They just simply are. They're not the same children.
exactly. And we would love to have you back to talk. Trauma is another field that I spend a lot of time in, and we would love to have you back for that. And I think we're coming up on our time for today. And we so appreciate you coming. Your expertise and the information that you've brought is just going to be invaluable to so many of our listeners as we grow and build this platform to bring this to other people. Danielle, did you have anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, what a powerful conversation. My head has been just on explosion the whole time that you've been talking, and you've been just so insightful and doing amazing work. And we have, this book framed that I am halfway through, and as I'm reading it, I'm highlighting. So, I mean, through the whole book, I'm just highlighting because it's so important just to get the word out, and your words are just so powerful. So I just want to thank you so much for your time and energy for being here and sharing what you have, and I hope to have you come back another time. That would be wonderful.
Thank you. And if I might mention, I have a children's book coming out shortly. Every Moment of Every Day. It's for protective parents who have to send their children to the abuser's house. It's for protective mothers in particular, but who have to send their children to the abuser's house, and how to really actually help the child in giving them the clinical tools to help a child regulate and understand that the protective parent is going to be there waiting for them every moment of every day.
Yes, because the protective parent is also the traumatized parent. And they're trying to fight through their own trauma to be able to and then manage the trauma of their children. So that's amazing. As soon as you get that, let us know, and we will definitely put that on our platform as well.
Hey,
Absolutely.
Dr. C, one other thing I just want to ask you is, if someone is in a domestic violence coercive control relationship, what is one piece of advice or hope that you can give them right now?
Well, I will speak to protective parents. And what I always say is that the one thing that happens if you are able to escape, and there's no judgment if you don't, because some people choose to stay because it feels safer. But if you are able to escape, your children will actually know you for the first time in their life. They will actually know who you truly are. And that's a
Mm.
gift. Mhm.
Cold chills running through my
Yeah,
whole
right.
body. Thank you. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. I appreciate your time and being here so much. And thank you for the work that you're doing.
Yeah. And that'll bring our episode 3 to the conclusion. And Stronger Roots is a nonprofit organization, and we have designed Stronger Roots to be able to bring this type of information to you. If you are in a situation where you need help, please reach out. Please reach out to the domestic violence centers in your area, and you can always contact Danielle and I for help as well, to make sure that we're helping you in the best way, most safe way for you and your children. And that concludes today. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thank you.